Welcome to Bitcoin and Me with Vijay Selvam. Hi, Vijay. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Gary. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You came to the BSE conference last September, so I had the pleasure of meeting you there and getting a signed copy of your brilliant book, Principles of Bitcoin. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you want to give just a brief overview of your background and your interest in Bitcoin?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the author of the book, Principles of Bitcoin, that I worked on with Columbia University Press. It was published last year, but I've been working on it for a few years. I spent most of my career in the financial services industry. I spent 11 years at Goldman Sachs, so very much from the Wall Street traditional financial world. I'm a lawyer, Wall Street, sort of financial lawyer sort of thing, corporate lawyer. I'm an attorney in the US and also a solicitor in the UK. I live in London now. And came across Bitcoin in 2013, I think, for the first time. And then it was only around 2017 that I started really kind of looking at it seriously, from first, calling it a Ponzi scheme and tulip mania and all the usual things that you kind of progress through, particularly if you're from my kind of background. And then, just really went very deep down that rabbit hole, decided to ended up writing a, kind of book on it. And I'm also quite involved in the Bitcoin treasury company space, non-executive director at XCE, Connecting Excellence in the UK. So yeah, that's a quick snapshot.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we'll come on to some of those later in the conversation. But the first question I ask all my guests is, what's your earliest memories of money as a child?
Yeah, I think back at sort of, when I first understood how the fiat system works. And I think I was actually very young. I was probably 4 or 5 or something like that when I think my father explained to me what these pieces of paper were and how historically it was gold that backed the pieces of paper. And then at some point, the gold standard was abandoned. And then that bit was just very blurry for me. And for many years, growing up, it was always just kind of a black box for me. I just didn't understand. Okay, but so how did we decide that we didn't need that hard anchor in something that's actually valuable, something that actually make those pieces of paper valuable? So yeah, I spent the next, 20 years or so oblivious, just going along with life, not really thinking about it too much. Probably more, actually significantly more than 20 years, I think. And then, so it was really Bitcoin. It was trying to understand Bitcoin that, kind of took me down the rabbit hole, really took me down the rabbit hole of money. But then I'll also say I was a big gold bug in 2008. So I was a lawyer on Wall Street at Davis Polk in New York during Lehman Brothers. I worked on Morgan Stanley's bailout package. I've been on calls with the Federal Reserve back in 2008, calls with Hank Paulson and so on at the Treasury. And so I was being very much embroiled in all of that. I could see that the system just didn't work, and I kind of understood it kind of from the inside. And that made me a gold bug. So I started, I invested in gold in 2008 and because I could see the problems in the system, how open to manipulation and moral hazard, the traditional financial industry and the monetary system is. So I did that. But if you look at how gold performed over the ensuing decade, it was pretty bad. I mean, it was just flat to down and it didn't really do very much. So that was quite frustrating for me. But I had no idea in 2008 when I was buying gold that there was such a thing called Bitcoin. I wasn't in that space at all. And then I wish I had looked at it with an open mind into 2013. I'd have a lot more Bitcoin. But unfortunately, I had to go through that process that most people go through, including, as you say, trying to understand money. And then I think from there, you kind of really appreciate Bitcoin.
You said your dad was trying to teach you at a very young age. I mean, wow, 4 or 5 years old.
I just vaguely remember a conversation, but then I have a very, kind of a bit of a photographic memory that part of childhood. And I do remember a conversation where it came up, and I was like, okay, so but these are pieces of paper, so why do they have value? And it was like an obvious question that, even as a child, it's like, why does this? I can just tear it up and, like, it's just paper. Why does it have value? And
It's
uh,
amazing
and you
how few people, even today, so few
right,
people ask
ask that
themselves that
question.
question, right?
And I think that's why Bitcoin really, in my book, the last chapter in my book is titled "Bitcoin is a Mirror." And what I was trying to say is that the process of studying Bitcoin actually is like holding up a mirror in front of you, because it teaches you about yourself as well. It forces you to think about your own political ideologies and philosophies. Where do you fall on the left or right spectrum, or the x-axis or the y-axis? Are you more authoritarian? Are you more libertarian? Are you more conservative, or are you more liberal? It asks you those questions and forces you to pinpoint, yourself, because Bitcoin is a libertarian ideology. So if you come more from the authoritarian mindset, then it might not appeal to you. And also it shows you, I mean, it sort of immediately reveals your intellectual honesty, your intellectual curiosity, and also your intellectual humility, because you've got to have these things to come at it and admit that, notwithstanding all your fancy degrees and your credentials and your, sparkling resume, there may actually be lots of things that you just don't understand. And I think one of the biggest mental blocks for people with my background from traditional finance is that they have that arrogance. So if you go to them and tell them you've missed the biggest opportunity, monetary invention in history, it's like, what are you talking about? I work in finance. I work in private equity. I work in what, a hedge fund. I've made tens of millions of dollars. What are you telling me about money? I know about money, right? They come at it from a very defensive perspective. So, and they miss it, unfortunately. So it also reveals your intellectual, basically your curiosity. So as you say, I think a lot of those people who don't ask those basic questions of what is money, um, it's very revealing of who they are and what they are. It tells you more about yourself than it does about Bitcoin.
And I think you have to be involved in Bitcoin and, as you say, intellectually curious enough to go down some of those rabbit holes to get there. A lot of people stumble across Bitcoin as, alongside other crypto, maybe probably more so in previous cycles. But let's say people who got into Bitcoin, 2017, 18, 19 were probably dabbling with other bits and pieces as well. And it was more of a, just another asset.
I think when I first started buying, crypto, my largest position was XRP. I'm so embarrassed by that. But you have to start somewhere. I mean, that didn't last very long. I kind of learned quite quickly. And then the moment I started reading about it and understanding that this is a monetary invention, and you understand where its place is, this is not just some online gambling Ponzi scheme. The moment you understand that purpose is when, but you're absolutely right. And I like that you start the conversation with this, what is money type of question, because that is really the right place to start. I like that. I don't know if you remember this, Ross Stevens, the Stone Ridge founder. He, in one of his shareholder letters, he talks about this, like, kind of this little story. It's like, I think he says two fish are swimming along in a river, and then two young fish and an older fish comes swimming the opposite direction, and the older fish says, "How's the water, boys?" Says as he's swimming by, and the two young fish, they don't answer, and they go a little further down, and one of them turns to the other and says, "What is water?" And so he says in the shareholder letter, you know, that, like, the question of what is money is that kind of a question. It's like the what is water. Like, fish were swimming in water all along. You just don't ask that fundamental first principles question. And many people are just swimming along, going along in life, using these notes and money and, these digits in their bank account without actually thinking or asking themselves, what is money? So that was a very nice way to put it.
Pound sterling was introduced in 750. And the amount of iterations it's had, started off pegged to silver, then moved to gold, and then off the gold standard altogether. And yet, most people that you'd stop in the street would be completely oblivious to all of that. And as you say, it's almost like water or electricity or you know, probably the internet these days. All of these things are almost just a basic life utility that
Yeah.
has just always been there, but
Yeah.
it hasn't. It is a technology
Yeah.
and it is a
And
human invention.
yeah. And it's also interesting, this idea of it just being, exists, like not being questioned, is also a very recent phenomenon, because throughout history, people did question money, and there were different kinds of money that existed in parallel. Actually, I had this quote, I think it was Kenneth Galbraith, John Kenneth Galbraith says in his book, which I quoted in my book. He says, "Money is a very old convenience, but the notion that it is a reliable artifact to be accepted without scrutiny or question is, in all respects, a very occasional thing, mostly a circumstance of the last century." So, and in his book, he talks about how, yeah, there's all these different monies throughout for thousands of years that existed in parallel in society. And this kind of monetary capture by the state is very much a kind of post-World War phenomenon. And I think I do believe that it was the world wars that really enabled the state to have this kind of the stranglehold on economies and societies, under the pretext of, protecting people and fighting wars which never needed to be fought, or were fought mainly because of their own miscalculations and misdeeds. All of that is really a function of the
What do you think will come along that might challenge that again? Do you think we're moving into a period financially and politically where maybe more people who aren't Bitcoiners will start to challenge money a bit harder?
Yeah, and so we're seeing that already. So with what's happening with precious metals, gold in particular, this year, well, last year, and so on, and this year is, I think, a clear statement of that. A big turning point was, I think, was it 2020 or 2021, I suppose, when Russia, when the US froze the Russian central banks, reserves, because they, acted, out of fear, behaved out of what the US wanted them to do with this, in any regard. But freezing a central bank's assets is really it's kind of an extreme measure. And I think that was a point when most other countries and central banks started thinking to themselves, okay, like, we might be in the US's favor right now, but which country has not been out of favor with the US at some point in time? Like, almost every country has. And so I think that was like a seismic kind of like moment when like that kind of switch went off. And if you look at, there are various charts, I think that show how central bank holdings of gold from that point kind of went up, and the holdings of treasuries. If you look at global averages, treasuries went down, and US dollars went down, and gold started going up. So it's been a gradual build up, but I think it's been really over the last year that central banks in the world have decided that something's got to give, and we are living in a multipolar world. And so this over reliance on the dollar and treasuries is just too risky. So I think they've started moving into the gold. I think at this point in time, gold is the largest reserve asset. I think someone said a few weeks ago that it was now occupied a higher proportion than U.S. Treasuries, but it was about 25% of global reserves. But there's been a massive spike recently, and also I think a commensurate fall in Treasury holdings. So we do seem to be moving into that era, and you say era, and there are a lot of countries that are now settling between themselves in gold. So they settle at the central bank, general ledger level in gold. So that's I think that seems to be definitely picking up. And I don't see that reversing for a while. Now, where does Bitcoin fit in there? I think is is the obvious question for us. I've always thought that is a natural progression, going from fiat to gold, and then people realizing that you appreciate gold for what it is, and then you say, okay, but gold has failed in the past because of all these shortcomings, right? Portability, divisibility, verifiability, these are all massive problems, which is why paper money came into place, and then trust was introduced and it started being abused by the state. So people say, okay, but yeah, sure, gold is better than fiat, But Bitcoin is obviously gold 2.0. It cannot be confiscated. It is divisible. It's verifiable, instantly verifiable. It's perfectly portable. So I think that might be the path of adoption for Bitcoin, but who knows? But I've never been able to explain this, right? Like if fiat has so many problems, and the biggest problem being scarcity, right? The fact that governments can inflate it away. Why isn't gold? Why doesn't gold have a larger market share? You'd think like if you were just coming in, like if you were an alien or something, or you just kind of appeared on the planet and you're learning things for the first time and you learn, okay, like this is fiat, this is gold, this is Bitcoin, whatever, all the other forms of money. This is the history of money. Fiat has all these problems, objectively speaking, thinking about it from first principles. Governments have complete discretion over the supply and they can inflate it away. That's a problem. Then you would think that, okay, then why aren't more people using gold as a store of value? Like since the 1970s and 80s, why is gold just a two, whatever, how many trillion is it? Like
It's in the
50 trillion.
20s, right?
Yeah, 50, 20
Yeah.
trillion or something. Why is it just 20 trillion out of 950 trillion, right? It should be at least 90 trillion, at least 10%, given all the shortcomings of fiat, right? So I've never been able to explain that. And to me, that's like one of the biggest question marks over even Bitcoin. Like, why don't people recognize gold's scarcity? If they don't recognize gold scarcity, why are they going to recognize Bitcoin scarcity? And that's kind of a circle I've never been able to square. But
Do you
yeah,
think part of that is certainly for retail, it's well, it's not easy to buy a house, but being able to verify a house is a house and it's got utility and you can live in it, or if you're buying it as a rental property, you can rent it out. So if you think of, I don't know what the share of global assets real estate is, but do you think it's bigger than gold?
I think real estate, I think it's 400 trillion, something like that.
Yeah, so a lot. So maybe like 20x gold.
Yeah.
Do you think part of that might be just because for average Joe, it's just easier and it's felt as having more value and something that is going to go up, whereas gold is something that's actually quite difficult and potentially dangerous to hold. Where are you going to buy it from?
Yeah.
And how do you look after it and make sure no one steals it?
Yeah.
Whereas the legal setup around.
There's ETFs. I mean, you could buy AU, what is it, GLD and so on. Different
Yeah.
gold ETFs can be a part of your portfolio.
But do you not think people are suspicious? Suspicious may be the wrong word, but there's a level of trust associated with that as well, isn't there?
I don't really think
am I
people are
really
thinking
buying?
that way, though. People, I
Okay.
mean, look, but then if you're okay holding dollars, pounds, or some kind of government bonds, or just kind of stocks, right, which occupies a much larger, percentage of global wealth compared to gold, you've gotten over that trust. You're not really too worried about BlackRock or State Street, actually holding real gold and issuing ETF shares. So there's something else. And put aside the retail element, right? I mean, the real money is in money managers, like, these big funds, asset managers, pension funds, and so on. Like, why haven't they held more gold, right? Why haven't they been spooked by the fact that, dollars and treasuries can just be inflated away? Why is it taking them so
Isn't there
long?
legislation? Is it legislation? Like some governments will say
Mm,
to pension funds, you have
yeah.
to hold X amount of bonds. So it might be that some of those fund managers would quite like to diversify more into gold,
Mm,
but the
yeah.
legislation doesn't allow them to do it. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, the US accounting rules incentivizes, and these reg cap rules also incentivize banks to hold US treasuries. They get a favorable accounting treatment and reg cap treatment if they hold treasuries. So that's a huge source of demand only because of those. They're basically gaming the regulatory system to boost the treasury market. But no, I mean, I don't really think there are real constraints on holding gold. I just think that people have not really appreciated the value of scarcity somehow, but they will. And I think it's becoming like, because inflation really became a problem only like more recently. I mean, it's kind of been really tangible since COVID, right? Before that, I think people were just meandering along and they didn't really care that much. But it's becoming a real problem now for the common man not able to go out and afford a decent meal for the family, or kind of a vacation or something. It's like it's become really palpable now, right?
And I think that's been the external narrative is, well, it was COVID started spiking it, and then we've had the Ukraine war, and
Yeah,
there's lots of external factors that the common man can look to, but actually a lot of the monetary debasement and the issues around the sustainability of fiat are also causing that, aren't they? As well
yeah,
as certainly in the UK, people are getting pay rises that are, historically might be quite good pay rises, but when all the thresholds of tax rates are being held, people are suddenly tripping into 40% or higher tax bracket. Means a 5% pay rise is only a 2% pay rise as take home pay, and you just can't keep up. You just can't
yeah,
keep up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I think those things will when the people that have historically been well looked after by the system, when they start to feel the pinch more, maybe that's when things will start getting a bit more rocky. But it's difficult to know what
Yeah,
catalyst or what straw might break the camel's back.
yeah. So yeah, I think so. So what's happened in gold is very telling, right? It's kind of almost unprecedented. Well, the last time we saw rallies like this was, I think, the 90s. So there's definitely some seismic shifts that are happening. Something big is afoot. It's in anticipation of something. So and I think most people, I mean, would say mathematically there will be monetary expansion. And when that happens, it flows into, I mean, in different orders. You can't predict the sequence of things, but ultimately it flows into risk assets. And that's where you get to the Paul Tudor Jones's fastest horse, kind of you invest in the fastest horse. And historically, I know it hasn't happened recently in the last few months, but historically, Bitcoin has been the fastest horse. To write it off, as some people are doing right now, just because it hasn't kept up with gold, is just this age. I mean, just you see it every single time, every cycle, people write it off, and then it completely blows everybody out of the park, right? So let's see how the year pans out, or 2 years. I don't know. I mean, we all, I can wait. I'm not in any hurry because I understand what it is. But it's important I mean, Bitcoin really tests you. Bitcoin tests conviction, and only the true believers get to experience that big exponential growth. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I still believe that it is the fastest horse. It just moves at a different timetable. So you just have to be patient.
What would be your explanation of that, though, to someone who says, well, I hear what you're saying, Vijay, but like if Bitcoin is scarce, and if people realize that, why hasn't Bitcoin gone on a rip the same way gold and silver
Yeah.
have?
The problem is exactly what you said. If people realize that, the problem is they don't,
Do
right?
you think that's the biggest
Of
issue then,
course,
is that
of
not enough
course. I
people
mean,
realize the scarcity?
I've said that. I mean, people say that Bitcoin has a 2% adoption. Yeah, I mean, 2% of the world has adopted Bitcoin. It's nonsense, right? It's far less than that. I mean, 2% is people who have opened a Coinbase account and got like $10 in free Bitcoin they become part of that 2%, right? That's a total nonsense figure. It's much, much smaller than that in terms of people who are actually adopting it. And then if you want to go into people who actually understand it, and who know that crypto is complete, bollocks. Bitcoin is the only story. Bitcoin is the only real invention in the heart of all of this. How many people understand that? I think it's in the tens of thousands out of 8 billion people on the planet. I think it's probably less than 50,000, or maybe even much smaller than that. It takes time for this kind of complex knowledge and understanding to permeate society, permeate the psyche of humanity. It takes time. And those are the whole hodl waves, as they say, right? Every cycle, there's a wave of people that come in. And as part of that, there will be some people who actually take the time to study it and understand it. And then when the wave recedes, everyone else, the retail gamblers, degenerates disappear. But there will be a layer of people who actually get it and they stay on. And then so this kind of keeps layering. So that is the adoption path. but it takes time.
Do you think that's a concern though and a risk for Bitcoin? If it's taking this, I say this long, it's been around
It's not
17
that long
years,
though. I mean, yeah,
it's
you're talking about a new money, a monetary system for humanity that is not really that easily understood. It's paradigm shifting. You're talking about, as GG put it, right? A digital, like what Bitcoin has achieved is it has made ones and zeros, digital information, obey the laws of physics. It's made information behave like a physical object that I can give you you're sitting in a different town. I can send you Bitcoin. It's like a physical act between two, on a peer-to-peer basis. You don't need a third person to record the transaction, which you've always needed for anything digital, right? That is paradigm shifting. And you don't just get it like that. It takes, what did they say, 100 hours or 1,000 hours? I forget,
yeah,
to actually
a
understand
hundred,
it.
hundred. I think
Yeah, I think it's
100
100
hours.
hours
Yeah,
to actually understand it, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like people, it's supposedly, I mean, it's been around for what, 18 years, but, it's really only been around, I would say, for about 10 years. I think it was a 2017 cycle when it really kind of was people writing about it, mostly misinformation, right? That's a big problem. Mainstream media is still misinforming the public.
yeah, yeah,
So I think it just takes time. But on the plus side, it's an opportunity, right? If everybody understood Bitcoin, just think about it. It would be well over, well, I don't know, it'd be $10 million or something a coin right now. Right? So like you and I won't have this opportunity to buy cheap Bitcoin. So I think it's important that it takes its time. It's come really fast. Like when you think about it, it's like, I mean, it's really been like a rocket ship if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the way it's appreciated. But the longer it takes, the better it is. People who are curious and open-minded get to come in and buy it at a reasonable price. Everyone buys Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's a good thing.
So what do you think will be the main catalyst to get more people adopting it, and where do you think the biggest hurdles are, other than the mental shift? So things like the volatility is always bandied about
Yeah,
as a reason why people are scared maybe of
yeah,
and see Bitcoin as basically gambling because it was at $120,000, now it's at 70. That's not that's not a serious thing. That's not something that you can invest in because it's,
yeah.
no things that you invest in should do that.
So I've always said that you never appreciate the solution if you don't understand the problem. So, if you go to someone who's living in right, and he's always had a decent job, he's well educated, and he has a good amount of savings, and tell him you should buy Bitcoin because it is insurance against confiscation of your wealth. It's insurance against censorship of your transactions. It's insurance against, permissioned transactions. It's permissionless. It's not going to appeal to him or her, right? Because he or she has never experienced the problem. And if you go to someone in Iran right now, they bloody well understand the problem, right? You go to someone in North Korea or, Syria or something like that, they understand the problem. Nigeria, they understand the problem. Unfortunately, people in Iran and Nigeria and Sudan or Syria and North Korea don't have a lot of money. So they're not going to be able to move the price much. Unfortunately, it's the Western society that has most of global wealth. And they haven't really experienced the problems, some of the problems that Bitcoin solves for, which is, confiscation and so on. Of course, they've experienced the scarcity issue that Bitcoin solves, right? The inflation. So I think that is the real hook. Yeah, so we probably need to have a big round of money printing again, QE, probably at some point in the future, which will happen again, mathematically, it will happen in order for people to understand the problem. So that is the thing. You need to understand the problem. If you don't understand it, Bitcoin is not going to mean anything to you. So unfortunately, it's a sad thing that when you ask me what's going to be the catalyst, I have to say that it's probably like some kind of doomsday or like an unthinkable event. It's like, when is your insurance going to be of any value? Unfortunately, it's going to be only when something bad happens.
Yeah. And I guess that could happen in, as you've articulated, it's happened in a lot of countries, but not particularly affluent countries.
Yeah.
So if it were to happen in the UK, for example, for whatever reason, that's probably going to send bigger shockwaves
Yeah.
around
Western
globally.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, and across Europe and America, if it can happen in the UK
Yeah.
or I don't know, any other France, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still while there are people that are still benefiting from that current system, it's hard to see. Do you subscribe to the view of the risks of AI to making that happen a lot quicker, i.e.,
Yeah.
it won't take a significant amount of people, white collar, whether it's accountants like me, lawyers, whatever, that suddenly the economy needs fewer of those professionals because AI just hoovers up that work. I went to Bitcoin Prague 2025 and I absolutely loved it. It's back again. If you're looking at going, use code GaryBTC at checkout for 10% off your tickets.
It's so interesting, and I have no like visibility. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but absolutely. I mean, I do recognize the force that is AI and how it's going to impact people like us. All the desk jobs, all the supposedly intellectual jobs, where lawyers, accountants, bankers, consultants, all these jobs that have historically been the highest paying jobs are going to be the first to go. Hasn't even started yet. That statistic that less than 1% of the world actually is using, the subscription, the paid version of artificial intelligence, right? It's like nobody really understands it yet. But when they start understanding, when companies start adopting it, it's going to be massive redundancies for sure. Right. And on the other side of that stick is, well, like, what does that mean? You think about the US economy, actually, that Citrini paper that moved markets a couple of weeks ago, that paper said, it talked about how, I think, what is the US economy is 70 or 80% a consumer economy, right? Who are those consumers? It's literally us. It's literally the people from the knowledge, information sector, right? The service providers who they're the ones who go out and eat fancy meals at restaurants. They're the ones who buy, all these whatever fancy clothes, and they buy all the houses and the holiday homes. So if they can't afford it anymore, that's literally that 70% of the US economy that's going to be smashed. Right. I don't think people have fathomed that. Of course, there will be winners from that, but how does that work? I don't know. I think it'll be much smaller class of winners. Again, exacerbating the K-shaped economy and, the wealth. What does all of this mean? I think it means there will be, I mean, if there's massive redundancies, interest rates are not going to be at 3%, whatever. It's going to be at zero or negative interest rates, right? When you have that kind of unemployment and impacting the economy. So interest rates are going to go down. There'll probably be different versions of helicopter money like UBI or whatever being, handouts and more money printing. And so all of those will flow into risk assets as they've always done. So I think that could be a big catalyst again for all risk assets, but definitely for Bitcoin. Again, it's a sad way to think about it, but these are terrible, it's a terrible world, a terrible, kind of landscape to envision. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin will be a winner, I think, in that environment. And it's like, I mean, AI makes things abundant, right? And in a world of abundant services and maybe even products, that which is scarce has value. And the only thing with absolute scarcity, which is again very hard for people to mentally grapple with the concept of absolute scarcity, but Bitcoin is the only thing with absolute scarcity. I mean, that also is a bit of a misstatement. I mean, you know, Picasso paintings is also absolute scarcity because Picasso is dead. Okay, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have any of the other monetary properties like fungibility and divisibility and portability and so on that
Yeah.
Bitcoin has. So among monetary assets, the only asset with absolute scarcity is Bitcoin. And so in a world of like incredible abundance that arises from AI, I think a Bitcoin has, will hold, incredible value.
I think the other thing that's interesting with what we might go through now is if you compare it to the Industrial Revolution, very manual, relatively unskilled work was replaced by machinery. So,
Yeah.
you didn't need 50 people in a field to harvest vegetables. A combine harvester came along and they were all out of work and the horses weren't required anymore.
Yeah.
The wave of AI is not going to hit the less affluent in society. It's going to hit, as you've articulated, it's going to hit the people that are higher up the economic scale, who actually contribute a lot more as well to the economy and tax and all of those things that support economies. So in some ways, a much smaller impact on those more tighter group of individuals further up the economic food chain, as it were, is probably going to have a much bigger ripple through the economy much more quickly. And I think I heard something on, I can't remember which, it might have been one of Pete McCormack's podcasts recently, where they were talking about the 2008 financial crisis. And in America, the subprime mortgages, the number of mortgages that defaulted was relatively low, but because of the level of leverage and the ripple effect of those defaults, the whole thing tumbled. And the kind of view is it's even more leverage now, whether your timescale is 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, where AI is going to start really kicking in. At that point in time, I think it's almost naive not to think that a similar crisis to 2008 will come along. I think the only debate really is, when will it be? How quickly will it happen?
Yeah, I agree. It's impossible to predict, I mean, these things. I mean, but I am very, very bearish on like white collar jobs. I think we have maybe another year or two to go.
So what if you had I don't know your family situation, Vijay, but if you had, I don't know, a teenage child right now, what would you be advising them to consider doing?
Yeah, I don't know. We have these conversations. I've had many of these conversations. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I think the only things of value will be those things. You got to just think long and hard about what AI can't do, and what AI can't do is relationships, building. Having building positive peer relationships in your profession, or among your peers, kind of thing. Good negotiation skills, advocacy skills. So if you're a litigator, for example, in the legal profession, you go to court, you have a good courtroom manner, and kind of when you speak, the judge listens to you. You have your great advocate, speak really well. Those types of skills I think will be valued, because I mean, again, I don't think robots are going to. I don't know, but I think the value of a human with a beating heart, pleading your case will always be of greater value, maybe. So that I think would be important. And no, I mean, not a lot, not a lot. So
Just
I think
earn money now while you can,
and
get a Saturday job, earn some
while you
money, and buy
can,
some
you've got to,
Bitcoin.
you've got to just buy assets. You've got to buy. I mean, if you're not comfortable, study Bitcoin, but if you're not comfortable with it, buy some hard assets. Unfortunately, most other assets, I think, will, they risk confiscation. Real estate is so easily confiscated in a dystopia, like we are, dystopic world that we're talking about. Gold bars can be confiscated. The only thing, confiscation resistant is Bitcoin. But own some hard assets is, I think, what everyone should be looking to do, regardless.
Yeah. And even if real estate isn't confiscated in the traditional sense that you might think, there's a tank arrives with military in it to take the keys off you, it can be relatively confiscated in the sense of, taxes for owning a property become so unbearable that, I mean, it already is to some extent for a lot of people, whether it's, mortgage, council tax, all of those things. But, there's no reason why additional taxes and wealth taxes and all of those things come along to just kick the can down the road just for a little bit longer.
Yeah. I mean, you're greatly vulnerable. People don't understand that. Again, because they've just been lulled into this sense of security because it's never happened. You live in the UK or the US or Europe, and such things would never happen because you think you have a reliable legal system and the rule of law, right? You've kind of just take that for granted. But who knows? We're entering some uncharted territories.
It's not a nice thing to think about, is it? But us Bitcoiners love to go down those
Doomsday
dark paths. And I think the other thing I always kind of bring myself back to is, I think we often have a more negative outlook on the general financial situation and think it will happen a lot sooner than it does. And actually, this fiat system could still go on for quite a long time.
Yeah.
and not completely implode. There will be other factors that will benefit some people, hurt others, but ultimately, unless there is some kind of black swan event, it's probably not going to completely explode.
Mm.
Maybe even in my lifetime. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
It's impossible to say, isn't it?
yeah. It's impossible to say, but I increasingly don't expect. I mean, people say Bitcoin will be the pin that pops the, fiat bubble and stuff like that. I don't really, I actually have started believing that it won't be Bitcoin. It'll be gold that initially pops the bubble, and then it'll be Bitcoin that pops the gold bubble. It's kind of that I think, because people understand gold. The world, everybody understands gold.
Do you think they do though, Vijay? Do you think people understand gold, or that the fact that gold's been around for longer and you can have a gold ring on your finger, and they, even if you people don't, the general population probably don't understand the intrinsic values,
Mm.
why there is intrinsic value to gold, but they just know that it is worth
Yeah.
something. So
It's but it's just it's yeah, probably it's hard to know, but I think all money managers will understand that gold has value because it's scarce. It's not rocket science. It's like, yeah, you ask any man, they tell you it's not because you can make jewelry from it, or you can use it for some physics or science, I don't know, experiment or something like that. It's because it's scarce. I think most people understand that, and they're not gonna, like, sort of look at you funny as they would if you talk about Bitcoin. Like, most money managers still look at you like, what are you talking about? When you mention Bitcoin, they think you're just some, wacko kind of. But if you talk about gold, everyone gets it. Sort of. So it's just easier. I mean, as you say, because it's been around 8,000 years, or more. Uh, People just understand it more intuitively, and it's an easier pill to swallow, right? Whereas Bitcoin is not, for most people, because it's hard. It takes time. So, but I think that's a fine. I mean, that's a good enough path. I think, it kind of makes sense to me if that's how it pans out.
maybe the pin that burst the gold bubble is Elon Musk finding
Yeah,
100 million tons of gold
yeah,
on another planet that they can bring
yeah.
back.
Could be.
You know,
Yes. So
which
that,
again, back to the Bitcoin thing, you can't find another 21 million
yeah,
Bitcoin
you
on
can't.
another
You
planet.
can't. I thought sometime, like, recently, someone said that they were able to chemically produce, like, lab grown
Hmm.
gold.
Yeah, yeah.
There's all these risks, right? And there's all these issues as well, like fake, pyrite, fool's gold,
Paper
because
gold.
of, because of
I mean, who
verifiability
really knows? Who knows how much gold is actually in Fort
in Fort
Knox?
Knox and
Really?
so on. Yeah. So all it takes is one major, like, shock like that, and then people are forced. Again, you don't understand, you don't appreciate the solution if you don't understand the problem. So you need to experience the problems with gold again, probably, to appreciate, what Bitcoin solves for.
Yeah. Let's touch on the treasury companies, because obviously you're a keen advocate, and as you said, you're part of the senior team at XCE on the board. What's your take when people talk about treasury companies as basically being paper Bitcoin and a much bigger risk, particularly again in a fiat world where things can be confiscated? Why do you believe people should be investing in treasury companies
Yeah.
rather than just focusing on spot Bitcoin?
Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly do not advocate Bitcoin treasury companies as a substitute for Bitcoin. I mean, I would never ever advocate that. So what do Bitcoin treasury companies do? I think they basically, if you, to me, I'm just, again, looking at first principles, and some people may disagree and take some kind of puritanical view on it, but for me, it's very simple. Like, you should own you should own Bitcoin. The reason you look at a Bitcoin treasury company is because historically, like, one of the biggest complaints about Bitcoin as a financial investment, from a financial investment perspective, has been that it doesn't have yield. It lacks yield. You buy a Bitcoin, put it into cold storage, whatever. 5 years from now, it's going to be worth much more in fiat terms, but it's still going to be one Bitcoin. And some people had a problem with that, understandably, whatever. Bitcoin treasury companies do is what Michael Saylor did. His innovation was creating a yield on your Bitcoin, technically. And that is the Bitcoin per share metric. So if you had whatever, like, what is it, $70,000, you can go and buy a Bitcoin today, and hold it forever, which is great. No one would find fault with you for that. I wouldn't. Or you can buy a Bitcoin treasury company share. Now, shares in a Bitcoin. Now, if let's say you had 10 shares, right? And those 10 shares today, it's not going to have one Bitcoin underlying it, depending on your MNAV, right? Multiple on NAV. But let's say it had half a Bitcoin underlying it. You're paying more for that half a Bitcoin. You could just buy a Bitcoin today, but you're only getting half a Bitcoin by buying those 10 shares. But what you're betting on is that through that company's expertise and access to financial instruments and financial engineering and all these, financial tools that you lack as an individual retail, person, they will be able to generate a yield on those shares such that, let's say in 5 years, those 10 shares that you own will have 1.5 or 2 Bitcoins underlying them. So from 0.5, they've gone to 2 Bitcoins. And so over a long period of time, you've generated a yield in Bitcoin terms on your investment. And so that $70,000, which you you could have bought in one world, you could have bought a Bitcoin with that. Now you're going to have, much more than that. You're going to have, multiple Bitcoins with it. So
You've got more in fiat terms, but more importantly, you've got more in
you'll have much more in
actual,
fiat
yes.
terms.
But it's
Commensurately more.
represented by fiat, isn't it, as well? So any treasury company share you have is always a fiat value, but
Yes.
backed to some extent by the Bitcoin that business owns.
So, but of course it comes with risks, right? It comes with you're taking management risk. It's not self-custody. I mean, if they screw up they get hacked, their keys get hacked, you've lost it all. They go bankrupt straight away. You lost your money. So there's all these risks. And that's why you need to pick your company. If you are doing this, you need to pick your company, do the research, study the management team, make sure they're all Bitcoin. They're not going to switch to an ETH or some Zcash or, whatever, some other, they're committed Bitcoiners, right? You've got to ensure that. And you're betting on, so do it it's like, you're kind of putting portion of your portfolio, your Bitcoin portfolio, in a higher risk asset in the hope that you generate some yield on it. But if you end up losing your money, you're not going to be on the streets, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. But it serves a very important purpose, I think, in the ecosystem. And corporate adoption was always going to be how the adoption story went. It's the natural progression of things. Companies are not going to, we're not going to suddenly enter some hyper Bitcoinized world where corporates no longer exist or something like that. Of course, the corporate structure where you pool resources and you create value in a society is here to stay. So you want to see that adoption by the corporate world of this new form of money. So it's all good. I think it's the right, course of events.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of people, me included, the majority of the investments they've made in treasury companies is in trapped capital, such as their pension, their SIP.
Right.
So it's not as simple. It's not as simple as saying I have an amount of money and I'm choosing between Bitcoin and a treasury company. It's actually I can buy Bitcoin with this,
right,
with the money I have
absolutely.
here, but actually what I've got stuck in a SIP, I can't buy Bitcoin.
I mean, for many people, it's the only way to access, exposure to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Many investment funds can't access, they can't hold crypto. The investment mandate doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
And so this is the solution for them. This is like enables them to get that exposure that they have been longing for.
Do you think the frothy MNAVs that we saw through June-ish time, probably last year, where I think that's a market thing, right? I don't think Saylor's spoken about this, and Andrew Webley has. It's not like these businesses were sort of pumping up, encouraging people to come and buy MNAV. But given, again, human psychology, which you've written about and you understand it really well, the human psychology is when things start getting really frothy, the excitement kicks in and people can then get really stuck, can't they? So I know personally some people that have invested in some of these treasury companies when the price was very high, and now they've either sold or they're just sitting on paper losses. And to be honest, I got myself a bit, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's do you, I suppose there's two questions. None of this being financial advice, of course,
Mm.
but given most of the treasury companies now are on or around one, often even lower than one. So yes, you're not buying Bitcoin, you're buying shares in a company that own Bitcoin. But if you're buying it for less than the value of the Bitcoin that they own,
Mm.
then as
Yeah,
long as they
discount.
can generate yield, you're buying the right to a Bitcoin at a discount, as well as whether you think some of those frothier MNAVs will follow when the bull market kicks back in and Bitcoin price starts increasing.
I mean, we've seen this rodeo before, right? Like, I mean, in 2021 or 2020, sorry, not 21, two and part of 2023, MSTR was trading at a negative MNAV, right? I mean, they've not dropped below one this time round, I think, but they were trading at a significant discount to MNAV. I mean, I remember I bought some MSTR when it was $20 in 2022. It seems like, and now seems to have hit rock bottom, and it's, what is it, 130, 120, something like that.
The old, yeah, I
Right,
think, yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, this is
And that
2022,
and that's after a split as well, hasn't
right?
it? There was a split in that time as well. When
Yeah,
I first bought Strategy, it was
yeah,
about $30, and I think
right.
they did a 10-for-1 split when it got to like 300 or something.
Okay. Yeah, they have traded at a negative MNAV, and then they went up. I forget what it was in June, but it was well over 2 or 3, maybe even 4. I think it hit
Yeah,
a
yeah,
peak,
yeah.
right? 26 top was not even like a FOMO blow off top. It was a very measured thing. MicroStrategy went back to like, four times whatever, 3 or 4 times MNAV. So of course, I think if Bitcoin goes back up to 150 or something $1,000, I think, Metaplanet is going to be once again trading at, high multiples and so on. I think so. I don't see why not. I mean, it's not a shit coin, right? Which has no fundamental value. Like, this is actually, it's a leverage play on Bitcoin. And so if Bitcoin goes up, it should go up. I can't imagine. But basically, I mean, here's the question, right? Is there a world where Bitcoin has gone to $200,000 and MicroStrategy is trading at a discount to MNAV? Like, this is like obvious. There's no world where that happens, right? Or Metaplanet or any of these ones that are trading at a discount. They'll at least be trading at one, but most likely at well over one in that scenario, right? So yeah, I mean, but it's like, it's the point is that it's many people say these are like shit coins, right? It's like crypto and, altcoin season and so on, but it's not. The beauty is this is all now part of a closed circuit system. It's all just Bitcoin. It's still part of the 21 million scarcity story, right? It's all it's all feeding that same narrative. So as a result, it all benefits from the same narrative. It's, the rising tide lifts all boats. So Bitcoin going up is the rising tide. All boats get lifted. I think all Bitcoin treasury companies get lifted unless they have done something completely crazy. Like, I don't know if Nakamoto is ever going to come back. There's some companies that have just completely shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
But the more measured, committed companies, I just don't see them like just, fading away or dying or anything.
Yeah. So you used to be fully entrenched in TradFi, Goldman Sachs, etc. There's quite a lot of people that will say those types of organizations, once they get and they already have their quite grubby mitts on Bitcoin with BlackRock ETF, etc. Do you feel there's any significant risk of more than 21 million Bitcoin being in circulation? Not literally, obviously, but with things like paper Bitcoin, could nefarious characters be selling ETFs that aren't actually backed by Bitcoin and playing kind of very bad games around that?
I mean, maybe. I mean, but you just have to be like, I mean, if you haven't learned from, Celsius and FTX and so on, and you're like, I mean, then I think you deserve to be burnt again. I don't really see that happening. I think regulation, I mean, the thing with, I mean, Bitcoin is sort of against regulation in the state and so on. But at the same time, if you want to have Bitcoin treasury companies, you do need regulation to make sure that the SEC is making sure that there's disclosure and people go to jail. You need to have those kind of the stick and carrot, right? So if Michael Saylor loses the keys or lies about holding the Bitcoin, he needs to go to jail. There needs to be that sort of thing hanging over his head. You need regulation. I think that the area is pretty well regulated now, so I don't really see that being a major concern.
Yeah, obviously there's futures markets and people with deep pockets can put in large positions to short Bitcoin, but
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
then
the whole Jane Street thing,
that's a whole
that,
different. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's
That's
like
a
this whole narrative, which I don't really buy. I mean, to be honest, like, it's a free market. You should be allowed to do those things. And if there's actual demand for Bitcoin, which there hasn't been in the recent couple of months or whatever, few months, but if there's actual demand, that knocks everything. You can't lie. You can't keep spooking the market. You can't keep manipulating the market. If there's actual demand coming in, you're going to get blown out of the water. So yeah, I think it's a free market, and I don't think we should just keep blaming random people. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's a bit weak.
yeah. I do agree with that. So you've worked in Singapore, you've worked on Wall Street. What made you settle in London? Why London? Why
I
UK?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of it feels like home for me. I went to university here. I spent the first well, I was here from the age of 17 to 26, which was kind of very years. Most of my very close friends live here, so it's always felt like home. So coming back here felt like a bit of homecoming. So
Yeah,
I'm here to stay.
yeah. Good. Well, I think the UK is better for having you. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And when it comes to elsewhere in the country, of course, you're coming out to Bury St Edmunds in May to our pizza day. So we're very much looking forward to having you back. Obviously, as we said at the start, you came to the conference last September, but we're doing pizza day in May. So you're going to come and talk about on some of the panels about Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So hopefully you're looking forward to coming back to beautiful Bury St Edmunds, Vijay.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I'm always intrigued by you know, hardened Bitcoiners appearing, in random parts of the English countryside. So, yeah, I really enjoyed coming up there the last time. Met some very, very interesting people. So yeah, very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, it'd be good. It'd be great to have you back. Yeah, it'll be a really good day, hopefully, and a great evening. Right, before I let you go, the last question I ask all my guests is, what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
That's a tough one. I can't think of anything that completely. I've always been very distrusting of the state. I grew up in India, and you can't not be that way, unfortunately. Um, So, but I think understanding Bitcoin and understanding, the separation of state and money and really, going down that rabbit hole, has cemented that perspective and really, and so I've completely abandoned any notions of the state being there for the benefit of people or the state being a good thing. I've really swung the other extreme on the libertarian scale. So yeah, I think that's probably the primary thing I've got out of Bitcoin.
Yeah, okay, good answer. Right, so if people want to reach out to you or find work you've done, where are the best places for them to find you?
I guess my Twitter X handle, Vijay Selvam, is probably the best place.
Yeah, and of course your book available in all good bookshops.
Yeah, yeah, it's available on Amazon and Waterstone, and it's being recorded actually right now. I think it's going to be out in April.
Okay,
So
okay,
yeah,
great,
soon.
good. That'll get even more people listening,
Hopefully. Yeah, there's been, I think most
reading it
people
virtually.
like, yeah, I didn't appreciate how many people actually prefer audiobook. So we should have had one earlier, but luckily we're finally getting it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it's great to speak to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the flesh in a couple of
Yeah,
months back in Bury St
likewise.
Edmunds.
Thank
Okay,
you for
brilliant.
having me.
Thanks again. Cheers, Vijay. Thanks.
Sure.